want to participate sort of in a teach in here where you're going to teach me. I'm going to say a few words, but I think, Maya, were you going to say something first?
Yes. I also wanted to greet everybody and thank everyone for participating today. I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Hoyer, in just a moment. But before we get started, I just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping items. So we're going to ask that all participants please mute themselves when they are not speaking. And if you would like to ask a question, make sure to raise your hand or leave a message in the chat box. This conversation, just for everyone's awareness, is being recorded and is being streamed live on Facebook. So I will now turn it over to Mr. Hoyer to give opening remarks and begin the discussion.
That's always a very threatening comment that they make and saying this is being streamed live, so you can't take it back. But I want to thank, as I said at the beginning, all of you, for what you do every day, leading extraordinary school systems, all of which I represent, and also participating in the PTAs and participating in the national organization as well, of the Parent Teachers Association, and overseeing where we are, where we need to be going. So I want to thank each one of you. I don't know that we've introduced everybody, for certainly those who are listening, but let me go through. Monique Jackson, who is the public school Anne Arundel County Deputy Superintendent. Dr. Daniel Curry from Calvert County, who's the Superintendent of Schools in Calvert County. Dr. Kim Hill, a very dear friend of mine from the Charles County Public Schools. She's the superintendent. Sadly, will be leaving soon. She's decided to go on to another phase of her contributions to our county and state and nation. But Doctor, thank you. And Dr. Monica Goldson, who I mentioned before, I think maybe everybody was on the phone. She and I have something in common. We both started at Suitland High School. She is a teacher, me as a student. And I observed that she's done much better than I have through the years. In addition, we have Teresa Dudley, who's the president of the Prince George's County Educators Association, also an NEA board member of the board of directors. Wayne Bauman, who's the National PTA Field Service Committee member. Mr. Bauman, thank you very much for being with us. Rashama Sananan Hill, who's the PTA president at Overlook Full Spanish Immersion School. Thank you for being with us. And Jared Tyler, who's the PTA president at Maya Angelou French Immersion School. I thank all of you, as I said at the beginning, for being with us, but also, much more importantly, for all you do every day to make such a difference in our school systems. I quote Frederick Douglass, obviously born a slave on the Eastern Shore, as was Harriet Tubman. I have a picture of Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman in my conference room in the Capitol, two extraordinary Marylanders. But Frederick Douglass, I quote all the time when he said, "It is easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men." And I think that is such a profound statement. And I also quote, and this may surprise some of you that haven't heard me say it before, Spiro T. Agnew. He and I were elected to the Maryland, I was elected to the Maryland State Senate, he was elected governor, and he gave an inaugural address, and the only line I remember from that address was that the cost of failure far exceeds the price of progress. Essentially, Douglass and Agnew were saying the same thing, that we need to invest in our children, in the education, not only of the young, but in our view, in an ongoing effort to make sure that people maintain skills or obtain new skills for a changing economy. This past year, of course, has been an enormously difficult year for America and Americans, and frankly, for the citizens of the global community. COVID-19 is unlike anything that I've experienced in my lifetime of 80 plus years. It is something that not only adversely affected the health of America, but it affected overwhelmingly the economy of our country and of the global community. We have had an extraordinary response at the federal level to that challenge that COVID-19 has created for our health and for our economic well-being. We have last year appropriated and authorized the expenditure of $4 trillion. None of us can conceive of what $4 trillion is. But it is a testament, because all of those bills were passed in a bipartisan way. I'm going to say something about that with respect to the bill that we just passed, but those bills were passed in a bipartisan way because the Congress, Republicans and Democrats, recognized, and the president, frankly, recognized the magnitude of the challenge that confronted us, and therefore the magnitude of the response that was necessary. $4 trillion, much significant portion of which went to education. As you know, we passed a couple of bills in March, and then we passed one in April and one in May. And as I said, the total of that, including the December bill that we passed, of a little less than $1 trillion, was $4 trillion. This time, when Biden campaigned for office, he said that we needed to continue that effort and to focus very much on making sure that we had a rescue plan, and then a plan for building back better, a plan for reinvesting and building America back. The first stage of that was, of course, the American Rescue Plan, or ARP. Feeling of Congress was, and the feeling at least of the president and those of us who are supporters of the president, was that we needed to ensure, after a very, very difficult 12 months, almost 12 months, now 12 months, that we were fighting COVID-19 and the radical change that it affected for all of us, and particularly for those of you who are directly involved in education. I know that I talked to many of you during the course of the last year, and talked to you about whether kids ought to be back in school, how were your teachers doing, how was the educational system doing, essentially communicating through the same medium that we're communicating today. And what could we do at the federal level to help? Obviously, President Trump said, well, we want to get people back to school. We agreed, we need to get people back to school, but we need to get them back safely. We need to get staff back safely. We need to get teachers, students. I know, having talked to some of you, that there was not a unanimity of opinion among educators and educational leaders as to exactly what the feasibility of having kids back to school. I know from personal experience, my granddaughter has 4 children. She's 32 years of age. She has 4 children, 3 of whom are in school. And she was, when that discussion occurred, I talked to her. I said, as a mom, what do you think, Judy? And she was very reluctant to send her 3 children in school. One of them's not in school yet. What do you think about sending them back to school? She was very hesitant and reluctant. Teresa Dudley's on the phone, and I know that I spoke to many teachers who were very reluctant. We want to get kids back in school. We're committed to getting kids back in school, but we must be committed to getting them back safely. Staff and children. During the course of our discussions, we passed 2 bills that the Senate didn't pass. They weren't, and we call them Heroes 1 and Heroes 2. One was passed in May and one was passed on October 1. And those bills had very substantial investments in both states and local governments and education in particular, and K through 12. in particular as well. You're familiar with those, I'm sure. They had significant sums, particularly in Heroes 1 and 2, for education funding, both at the K through 12 level and in higher education as well. Those bills, as I say, were not passed. And although we had some resources in the bill we passed in December, they were, when you divide it up between 50 states and multiple school systems, et cetera, pretty small sums. So this time, as all of you know, we are sending very substantial monies, well over $100 billion to schools systems directly. May go through the states in terms of payment, but directly to the schools. And they are designed specifically to make sure that we are going back to school safely, not only in terms of the schools themselves and the ventilation systems, which will be a significant sum of money. And I want to hear from all of you as to what you think perhaps these dollars will do and how effective they will be, and what you think lies ahead and how quickly we can get to a place where we need to be. And I also want to hear, because I know Ava, my oldest great-granddaughter, is back in school now. I think she's at Northern in Calvert County. And she's back in school now, and she is delighted. I saw her on Easter, and she is just beside herself. Now, she's a kid that loves school, so that's great. Dr. Curry is glad to hear that. But the state of Maryland, as you know, is getting $1.75 billion in immediate aid to reopen schools safely and to make up for lost learning time. I want to hear from some of you about that. The theory being that not only do we need dollars to get the schools in a situation where they're healthy, but also that we have additional resources necessary to try to fill the gap, which I think is not fillable ultimately, unfortunately, for a lot of these kids who lost that in-school experience, that personal relationship. And again, Dr. Hill and I had a discussion about whether we could get back in or not. But in any event, we recognize the states and local school districts know best what works for their communities and students, and of course, the local school boards. And I know there's been some difference between the school boards and educational leadership in our state as to what we could do and couldn't do. The educational provisions, as you know, in the bill provide for direct payments to Americans to help them through the difficult economic times as well. And that's going to be very important for your parents. It's going to be very important as well that we've given some assistance to renters and mortgage holders. So we're trying to relieve some of the economic stress that the parents have and particularly put people back into a place where they're a little more comfortable economically and therefore less stress in the family. In addition, as you know, this bill puts substantial resources into childcare, a very, very important component, particularly when you're looking at if kids come back, if don't come back to school, the childcare system has been really stressed and parents have been stressed as to going back to work or kids going back to school and when they can go back to school. We also provided direct, as I said, housing and nutrition assistance to those who need it. Obviously, as you know, we also early on provided money so that school lunch systems and school feeding programs could continue. The Biden-Harris administration and the Congress are working together to ensure that businesses, schools, communities, and households have all the tools needed to get through this pandemic safely and build back better. As I said at the beginning, I think one of the most important expenditures any community makes is in its education system. If you don't have a good education system and children cannot learn and are not learning, you're not going to have a successful society. You're not going to have a successful community. You're not going to have a successful economy. unless we do our work in education. And that's one of the great differences between ourselves and some other countries that we did build an education system open to all, a very democratic with a small d system that has made all the difference in creating a middle class and creating a vibrant American economy and to creating happy families. And the best investment we can make, in my opinion, as we move forward, is to make sure that system is funded in a way that allows it to do its job in the best possible way. So again, let me close with that. Thank all of you. And then I'd like to hear from each one of you as to your thoughts regarding what we've done, what you think we still need to do, or frankly, better yet, what you think you need to be doing in your school systems and what you think these resources will enable you to do in your systems. So again, let me stop with that. And I'm going to go in alphabetical order by county. I could go alphabetical by name, but I'll go by county. And let's start with Monique Jackson, who's the Deputy Superintendent. And again, Ms. Jackson, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much, sir. As you alluded to early on, it was in the pandemic, it was apparent that we were going to be able, as a school system, we were going to need to support families, not just in the educational opportunities for their students, but in so many of those building blocks of the educational opportunities. And as such, we became a hub for food, technology, social services, and mental health. And the funding that has been used prior and will be continued to be used will be used in that manner to give students the opportunity to have those foundations so that they can be available to learn. Additionally, we have students who have returned to in-person learning, but we also have some families, because of personal choices, choose to remain virtual. And as such, we will continue to provide professional development for our teachers and other staff members to make sure that both groups of students continue to receive a state-of-the-art education, continuing with the hybrid learning through the end of the school year, as well as making sure that virtual learning is robust and that our students are receiving the supports that they need, especially in the area of mental health. We have noticed, and we have given a lot of surveys to our students and our parents, and that is probably their number one concern. And so we will continue to support our students and our families in those areas, all while continuing to focus on our strategic plan, which, as you also alluded to earlier, focuses on eliminating the opportunity gap. And you talked a little bit about summer learning. We have recovery groups and what we call forward-thinking groups that are planning not just the recovery, but the pre-teaching, the pre-learning for students in the next school year. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. And we'll go next to Calvert County and Dr. Curry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I also say something? I'd love to hear from each one of you, just for my information, as to where we are in terms of percentages or some sort of estimate of people who are in person, who are in person and virtual. Doctor?
Okay. Thank you, Congressman. In Calvert County, we're in hybrid mode for everyone. High schools are seeing about 50% of the students choose hybrid and 50% choosing virtual. A little bit more choosing hybrid at middle school, and at elementary school, it's probably closer to 2/3 of the students are coming in hybrid form. We do A group and B group 4 days a week, A group for a week, and then B group for a week. And with Fridays are what they call asynchronous. There's certainly those who ask, aren't we going to just bring in everybody right away? And we're not sure that the guidance from CDC makes that that much more effective. There's major issues still with transportation. I can tell you, I was part of a webinar last week done by the U.S. Department of Education, where they had 2 superintendents speak who have had their kids in school full-time since August. They were so opposite. One was 120,000 students in Duval County, Florida, and one was 900 students in a suburb of Chicago. And I typed in the chat, how did you do transportation? Because they have 80% of their kids been coming to school every day since August. And I said, how many on a bus? They both said, oh, 2 to a seat. That's about 48 on a bus. That meets no guidance that we have seen. And basically their attitude was, we had no choice. We had no choice, so that's a rule that we ignored in order to serve our community. So I just thought that was an interesting contrast to those of us who are trying to get those who need transportation in with 1 child in a seat. So about 22 on a bus that can carry 60 some. And that's one of the things we've got to be able to get past. We have, as far as our needs for the future, as has been mentioned, we're all looking at the idea of full virtual school being a new part of what we offer as public schools. Just another option, another menu option for public schools. I think it's part of the future. And so we're just did unveil yesterday's board meeting some background for what we hope to put together. We want to separate those folks who want to do full virtual school next school year. And then everyone else, our goal would be to be back full time. As far as recovery, summer school, I don't know what the rest of you are running into. It's hard to get teachers to say they're tired and worn out. This has been a difficult time, and it has been. And so they are reluctant to sign up to be teaching summer school. And so we'll be looking at what other options we might have with any summer program to make them. We don't need to do any more virtual. We want to bring them in, have a camp-like atmosphere, and focus on both social, emotional, and academic development. We have perhaps some of the new resources provided by Congress. It might be valuable for us to be able to use them to keep class sizes reasonable and just maintain a more effective distribution of the student population among our teachers. So we have a lot going on, and I can't say enough how much we appreciate the support that you've made sure that we get, because there's just like this past year, there's still much we don't know yet, and there's still we're not looking to go back to normal. We're looking to bounce forward into a new look at how public schools operate and serve their communities.
You know, Doctor, on that point, and I think all the rest of you undoubtedly agree, I think COVID-19 will change permanently much of the way we operate, not only in commerce and education and other areas of our lives. I tell people I do a lot of Zooms, as you can imagine, with people around the country, either fundraisers, political events, or just official events. And I tell everybody, you know, we may not be in the same room together and we can't touch one another, but we're in the same box together. I think this technology really has grown on people. And I was interested, Dr. Curry, when you said that there were some people who may want to stay virtual, which I don't know. I don't know what my opinion is. I'd love to be interested to hear your guys' opinion in terms of can that be as effective as in person? I don't. My wife is, I think probably all of you know, is a teacher, and she did an experimental effort in Prince George's County, I think in 1967 maybe, in Morningside, Maryland, where it was team teaching open school. And they judged it a success, but I really don't think it was much of a test because they took the best teachers from around the entire county and put them in that school. And very frankly, I think they would have had a good result no matter what kind of system they had. But nevertheless, I think that's something I think we're all going to have to talk about and advise parents of. Is it as effective to have children looking at their screens as it is to dealing one-on-one, even though you're in a classroom of maybe 25 to 30 or hopefully less, but probably more students in any event.
Certainly, we don't disagree, especially for the young ones. We're not offering full-time virtual for K1 or 2.
Yeah.
It's not developmentally appropriate. It's interesting, though, that we're getting some pushback from some parents of children that age who want to have that as an option. It may be because of their own health problem, that they don't want their child going out into the public and perhaps bringing something back to them. Whereas previously it might have been a child's health issue where we might have provided that kind of service. Now it is sensitive health issues of other members under the same roof who might lead to be part of the reason why a parent wants their young child. But definitely the little ones, we'd rather have them in to teach them a lot of the social skills that they only get whenever they're sharing space with each other, and the independence they get when they, my wife's a first grade teacher, and she's very fond of telling her kids, solve your problem. And when you're working from home and you've got a parent on your shoulder helping you, reminding you what the teacher just said and coaching you along the way, you're not going to get nearly as independent as you will be when you're in the classroom and one of 20.
Doctor, my experience was being married to a first grade teacher is a great leg up in life.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Let me go to Dr. Hill, my buddy.
Thank you, Congressman. It's good to see you, and thank you for all your support. The fact that you're holding this forum and listening to us says volumes about who you are as a leader, and we appreciate that tremendously. You know, with COVID-19, a lot of us think about and talk about what has been lost, and a lot has been lost, but a lot has also been gained. And through the support of the federal dollars and state dollars that have come our way, we've been able to kind of change on a dime the way education is experienced in our communities. And as my colleagues have said, some students have thrived in the virtual environment while others have not. And it's those that have not that all of us as educational leaders worry the most about. You asked the question about what is the situation on the ground in our school district right now. In Charles County, we are I think one of the most careful in coming back in person. And I know Monica, my friend in Prince George's, is experiencing the same thing. But we just recently brought back what we're calling special groups, special populations of students. They're back in our schools 4 days a week. Those are special education, English learners, children of employees, as well as some students who are involved in some of our career and tech programs. They've been back in school 4 days a week. On April 19th, we're going to bring back 2 days a week any K through 12 student who wants to come back. In Charles County, that's averaging about 32% of our families who are saying, yes, we're ready to send our children back. Now, in some of our schools, it's almost 75% of the families. And then in other schools, it's more like 20% of the families. So we see a big disparity by community as far as those who are interested in coming back. I think I'm going to say something that all of us would agree upon right away, and that our teachers have been heroes. They have absolutely stepped up to whatever challenge has come our way. And in this last year, superintendents, teachers, all of us have felt like whack-a-mole, you know, where where we think we're moving in the right direction and we have a plan, and we have plan A and plan B and plan C, as education leaders always do. And then something else happens and we've got to throw all that away and start over again. But our teachers, no matter what, have figured it out. And they've done that because they know they're responsible for the children in their room, whether those children are virtual or in person. And right now we have teachers who are teaching face-to-face children as well as virtual children at the same time. And I can tell you that's not ideal, but it's certainly something that our teachers are really doing a nice job with. They have figured out, they've got 3 screens in front of them, camera here, camera there, whiteboard here, and they have figured it out. And something that I would love to see some work on the federal level that maybe could push the states is, how do we get more really smart, creative people to want to be teachers? How do we do that? Because I'll tell you right now, just like Dan Curry and Calvert, we are having a hard time getting teachers to come and want to teach summer school, where we can address some of the interrupted learning challenges that we have. But how can we as a society take this moment and say, teaching is important, and we're going to reward you for going into this very difficult and demanding job? Because right now our society still isn't rewarding teachers the way they need to be rewarded. And we as education leaders are going to face a real problem in staffing our classrooms moving forward. Because if you look at the numbers in higher ed about the number of folks in college who are pursuing teaching as a career, it's way down. And I don't want to quote the number because I think I might have the number incorrect, but it is way down. And so we need to use this moment to figure out how we can entice smart and creative people to become teachers. And now I'm off my soapbox. I apologize, Congressman. But that's an important problem this country's got to figure out.
It's a good soapbox to be on. And when you say reward teachers and that they're heroes, we named, as you know, the bill in May was the Heroes Bill, and the bill in October 1, or in September, but October 1's when we passed it, was also called Heroes 2. And it was dedicated to our teachers, to our police, to our fire personnel, to our emergency medical response teams, to our nurses, to our doctors, or all the personnel in our hospitals, as well as, frankly, grocery store workers and other essential personnel that had to go to work. In terms of rewarding teachers, very frankly, I have 3 daughters and their mom was a teacher, and they loved and respected their mom greatly. But they used to say to her, "Mom, you work so hard and you make so little." It's not any secret in a capitalist system. If you want good employees, whether they're teachers or doctors or whoever they are, you have to be competitive. And it's hard to get the public to focus in on the competitiveness. We thank God we have heroes who are willing to do extraordinarily hard work and extraordinarily important work, and do it because they love the work, they love the children, they feel called to that profession because they know, for the most part, competitively, they can go into other enterprises and do better economically. And either they want to do that or they're compelled to do that in so many instances simply by the economic realities of their lives. Doctor, and maybe others can mention it too, what are your thoughts about the resources you're going to get in the system and how that's going to be spent?
So the grant resources that are coming our way, it's going to be spent in a couple of different ways. First of all, we want to address the interrupted learning, the gaps that are going on in classrooms. Our data, and this data is clear across our entire state. More kids are failing now than failed this time last year. They're failing courses. So what we're doing, and many of my colleagues are also, is we're setting up tutoring programs, because tutoring is something that's research-based as a way to identify and address gaps. We'd like those tutoring groups to remain relatively small, 5, 6 children or less, so that we can really hone in on and address personalized issues with kids. The other main expenditure that we have is infrastructure, where we're looking at those air conditioning systems, and we're looking at air purifiers and filters and all of those things that we really aren't experts in, but we've learned a lot about in recent days. So those two things are immediate items that we're spending money on. We're spending money this summer, some of the grant money from the ESSER 2 grant, on actual transportation for kids to come to summer school. So summer school, typically in Charles County, families would have to provide the transportation. And this summer, we're providing free transportation to any child who wants to come to either a summer school type program or an enrichment camp, any type of educational program that we have. And Dr. Curry talked about the challenge of how many children we can put on buses. You know, the CDC guidance, we're going to have to use it as guidance, not a rule, because if we've got to put more kids on buses, we're going to put more kids on buses and just have them wear their masks and sit in family groups. But we need to get children to where the educators are. So those are a couple of ways. I'll let my colleagues.
Okay. I think mainly because I've talked too much, we've gone a little long. If everybody's all right with it, I'm going to suggest we're supposed to end, I guess, at 11:30, that we go to 11:45, a little more time for discussion. And we'll now go to Dr. Golson from Prince George's County.
Good morning. It is a
Good
pleasure
morning.
to be here. Thank you for having me, Congressman Hoyer. So I
You
want to
bet.
share that we started in-person learning yesterday for phase 1, which are students grades pre-K through grade 6 and 12th grade students. And then on April 15th, we will bring in our students grades 7 through 11. We have 31% of our families who have decided to bring students back for in-person learning. Most of them are at the elementary level, with just like many of my colleagues have already shared. We're grateful for the funds that we received before, and the funds that we plan to get coming up, along with teachers being our heroes and amazing during this pandemic. Our food service workers have been phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And I am grateful for the USDA regulations that were relaxed, because that allowed us to serve 7 million meals to our students from March of last year until I calculated that as of this past Monday, this past Tuesday. So that was phenomenal, because we didn't realize how much of a food insecurity situation we had until this pandemic shone a great light on it. Through our additional funds, we were able to begin to close the digital divide that existed by paying for Wi-Fi, not only for our families who are free and reduced meals, but also for those families who didn't qualify but found themselves in a situation where they couldn't afford to pay for Wi-Fi anymore. And we were able to utilize those funds to make us a one-to-one school district. So I agree with a lot of my colleagues. We won't have the same form of normal teaching that we experienced when we were in person before. I knew in July, when we announced that we would have to begin the school year with virtual learning, that would also change how we looked at education. And we expect to offer parents, I think one of the things, and I'm grateful I have parents on the call today, is that they appreciate the opportunity to have options between virtual and in-person, because just like my colleague said, some students have been great at in-person learning and others have not. And it's the others that have not that we worry about, as Kim shared. We used funds for professional development. All teachers, when they went to school, they did not plan for this experience. So the first day of school for everyone was like the first day for every teacher, because now they were learning a new experience virtually. And now we're asking them to teach simultaneously, what students who are virtual and in person. And I guarantee you, by the end of the day, they are extremely tired. So we really do have to find a way to make sure that we continue to protect that time for our teachers, for their planning, creativity, but still making sure that the delivery of content is done with efficacy. We were able to utilize the funds for continued support for mental health. I'm grateful that we have 90 clinicians, schools that have clinicians, but I have 206 schools. So I plan to use the additional funding that we'll be getting to help to expand mental health support. We too, just like everyone else, will provide a robust summer program to address interrupted learning. We want to definitely use our funds to upgrade our HVAC and air circulation systems. Unlike many here, our buildings are approximately 50 years of age. And it takes a while for us to get through the whole state and county process in order to fund replacement of HVAC systems. So we will utilize these funds to help to address that, but continue to support teachers in professional learning, because as Kim shared, we have some teachers who have cameras all over the classroom, whiteboards up, who are using new types of software to get to students. We want to make sure we continue to support and foster teachers who want to continue that, because even when you come back for in-person learning, it's still going to be different. Our students who are back, they bring their laptops because there will be opportunities for independent practice while they're still in the presence of their educator and doing it in a different, robust way. And then lastly, we'll continue to use it for upgrades for PPE and safety and sanitation measures. When we first got the first set of funds from the federal government, we were having adults we were in a discussion about having adults take temperatures of students. Quickly, in 2 months, it changed from a person doing it to mounting a system on a wall that could do it, and all you had to do was stand in front of it. And that's how fast technology has evolved during the pandemic. But that means that you have to have funds in order to support that evolution of new devices to help support safety. Mm-hmm. So we are grateful for everything that we received. As I've shared, as many of my colleagues have shared, virtual learning, I believe, will not go away. To have that option for parents, I think, is going to be critical as we move students back to 5-day learning programs in the fall. Thank you.
Let me ask you something then. If you have both virtual and in person, does that stretch your teachers? Do you have sufficient personnel to do that, or is it making a difference?
It definitely does. What all of us as school leaders have to do, school system leaders have to do first, is to get an analysis from our community of how many families are interested in continuing with virtual versus in person. And then we have to then determine and work with our labor partners to figure out who are those teachers that then would help to support that, and then how many additional teachers will we need, which then brings us to the point that Dr. Hill shared, is we really need a pipeline of educators. While I'm grateful we have a teacher academy in our school district and we are growing our own, it's still not going to be enough. So we have a partnership where our students will graduate with an associate's degree and can then go to University of Maryland or Bowie State to get their bachelor's degree to become educators, and they're students of PGCPS, just like I am. It's still not enough. So any incentive and encouragement we can get from across the country to elevate the role that our teachers play is going to be crucial.
Thank you very much. Dr. Smith from the mother county.
St. Mary's County, small but mighty. We have about 3 out of 4 kids are back in school in hybrid. That's, Head Start, pre-K through 12, so 2 days a week. With next Monday, we start our 4th quarter, and our final quarter, we're bringing back about another 20% of kids that will be attending all 4 days. And we looked first at special ed students and homeless students and English language learner students and students who demonstrated struggles with online learning. So if they're failing 1 or more core content classes, they're going to be back in person 4 days a week. So we'll get through to the end of the school year. That's pretty much what we're telling all of our staff is, you've done great work. You are heroes, and we're going to get to the end of the school year. I think that Heroes 1, Heroes 2, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, those funds were fantastic. They were timed very well to help us. we in St. Mary's, like everybody else, we took that money and we really invested it in technologies and platforms so that while we were unable to gather back together again, we'd be able to support. St. Mary's County went from 1 to 3 with computers to 1 to 1, and with 60% of our kids connected outside of the school to being 94% connected across the system. And a lot of that was through the broadband for underserved students, the bus grants. And we got over $2 million. We were able to connect the last several houses. So we really did develop a system that allows us to have meaningful, synchronous learning in a rural, mostly rural community. So that's positioned us really well. The rescue plan funds, that's a sizable chunk of money, and to be able to use it over 3 years, we can be very planful for the way that's going to be used. A lot of that's going to go to establishing this virtual education option for parents. So that's going to be really great. I think that the challenge that we see, and I think every school system sees, is especially with air quality. We're talking a lot about, coming in and filtration systems. Boy, that gets expensive exceptionally fast. MERV ratings on our schools are 10 to 11. To get them up to 13, which is still not anything to really control bacteria. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars recurring and millions of dollars of investment in HVAC systems. And ultimately to get to that HEPA level where it actually is blocking out virus level particles, that's an almost unfathomable amount of money. So I know that there's been a lot of discussions about purifiers and all of these things, that if money gets siphoned away from good educational programs and technology solutions and staffing, that's the only thing that we're trying to balance that. And as back to Dan's comment about the CDC, we were taking CDC as gospel, those are the rules, kids, and you don't break the CDC's rules. And what we see is a lot of people backing away and going, no, those are guidelines. Those quite frankly, they're suggestions. We're going to have 50 to 60 kids on a bus. We're going to have several hundred kids in a lunchroom. We're going to have a 3-foot rule and consistent masking really be the practice that gets implemented to get kids back in school. And we need everybody to really understand that that's what it looks like going forward. I think that we've had 13,000 kids of our 18,000 kids are back in schools. We've been doing it for a month and a half, and we have less transmission. We have less instances of cases within our school, and we haven't really had, except for 2 instances where there was transmission between students or between staff and students. So there's every indication that when we find our way back to schools, it's going to be as safe in schools as they are in the wider community. So it's funny. I'll just end with, I know for time, but Congressman Hoyer, March 5th, 2020, we all got called up to a face-to-face meeting as we were first considering, what will the pandemic mean for all of us. And I really do appreciate a little over a year later, we're coming back together to have a real discussion. The amount of money that is available for investment, we have to make sure that we really look at how we plant seeds to really benefit us in the future, because I don't know that we'll find ourselves in a position like this again, where there is that much money and infrastructure being put towards educating children. So I really do appreciate your leadership on all of it.
Well, and I appreciate, Doctor, your comment on that issue. I will tell you, those of us, none of us, if asked 24 months ago, will you vote for $6 trillion of spending next year? We would have said, are you out of your bloody mind? $6 trillion of spending? That's a third of the GDP of the country. We did that because we believed it was necessary. And as I say, the first 4 or 5 bills were bipartisan. This was not. No Republican voted for this last bill, as I think all of you know. They believed it was too much of an expenditure of money. However, the majority made the conclusion that the challenge was of a magnitude that it required this kind of response. But I will tell you that if we don't spend this money wisely, not for just the short-term challenge, but for making a difference in the long term, then we're going to be subject to a lot of criticism. So your comment at the end was a critical. I'm going to be talking to all the municipalities as well about that very issue. They're going to get, some communities are going to get monies that they never conceived of having, and they need to spend that wisely and effectively, again, at their option and what they're doing. But that's a very, very important point, that we spend this money in a way that 5 years from now, we see results, not just 12 months from now, we see results. I know putting kids on the school bus and getting into classrooms and stuff like this, hopefully, as all of you know, we put $160 billion into getting shots in arms, testing, tracing, technology, pharmaceuticals, trying to make sure that this is not going to be with us forever, that in a few months, we're going to be at a place where having 200 kids on a school, or having 60 kids on a school bus will not be what CDC guidelines say, because we will have gotten, hopefully, to 75 to 80 to 85% vaccination in this country. And very frankly, we need to make substantial investment globally, because obviously that's critically important. We're not an island, separate and apart from the rest of the world. So thank you for that observation, but it's very important that we look at this money as not only short-term, but also long-term changing, so that in the future, 5 years from now, people can say, boy, that money really made a difference, and it's making a difference now. Now, let me go to the representative of the heroes, Teresa Dudley, who represents teachers both in Prince George's County and nationally. Teresa, thank you for being with us.
Good morning, Congressman Hoyer. First, I'd like to say that I am very proud of the educators who have just stepped right up. I mean, my Vice President, Yvonne Basic, had no idea how to use a Google Classroom when we went to distance learning. And as a 30+ year educator, she really dug in, and many of our educators dug in. And I just want to say that while I'm hearing a lot of conversations about educational loss and gaps, I want to say that I know that our teachers in Prince George's County, Charles County, Anne Arundel County, all across the state of Maryland, are doing the best that they possibly can to make sure that our children are continuing to learn, and learning never really stopped. I think there are definitely some lessons to be learned. And as we move forward to reopening the schools that we want to see, there are some steps that we need to take. And I'll address that in a second. But first, I want to thank Dr. Golson for being so brave in this new world and saying, look, we're going to take the time and make sure that people are safe for the first semester of this school year. We're now heading back into schools, which I'm happy to hear about the resources that are coming our way. The big issue is how do we get our infrastructure in a place where safety is not, oh my God, we got to make our schools safe, but that when schools reopen fully, that we're reopening the schools that we want to see. We have a unique opportunity in Maryland right now to see resources like we've never seen before. The passage and the override of the blueprint is giving us the opportunity to not only have state resources, but federal resources coming in to our districts at a time in an infusion that we will probably never see in our lifetimes. So it's up to us to make sure that we do things to make sure that that these resources are not, number one, supplanted, and number two, excuse me, that we address some of the mitigating factors. Number one, the ventilation systems and the aging infrastructure of our schools. Many of our schools are not able to even utilize the MERV filters because the HVAC is so old. And I know Dr. Golson and her team are working diligently and working and trying to do this. And you dipped off for a second, Dr. Golson, but I just gave you some roses about how proud I am of the work that you have been doing and working with us. We still have some underlying issues that we need to address. Number one is, and this is one of the big ones, is how do we address the technology divide? While we were able to provide resources to students, we weren't able to reach every single student with the technology. And also, how do we, if we're going to use the technology, how do we make it so that educators can also afford the E-rates program? And Antonia and I discussed this when I met with her about how a lot of our educators can't afford, especially the new teachers, to pay, $60 a month for broadband internet access. And so it's very slow, you get dropped off, and the E-rates program is not available for educators. Many of our teachers after school are sitting in McDonald's and Starbucks trying to get on the internet when we were in school. So because they didn't want to work do their schoolwork in the building after hours. I think that the nurses issue is a big problem because many of our nurses are caught up in the delivery of service for the many hospitals and healthcare providers that are dealing with the COVID virus. So it's been challenging for the school systems to make sure that there's nurses in every school. That is something that we are in conversation with the school system about. The other thing that we discussed, and I've heard it mentioned by several of our school system leaders, is the shortage of educators. I always wanted to be a teacher ever since 4th grade, but I let people steal my dream. I let people tell me that teachers don't make any money, so you shouldn't get your degree in education. And I went to college and I majored in something other than education. And then I was in between jobs and started substitute teaching. And Prince George's County Public Schools gave me the opportunity by providing me, because I was working as a sub and in the computer lab, to return and get my certification. And I had to commit to a couple of years of teaching, but it gave me that opportunity to get into the profession. Imagine where I could have been in this profession had I started, and I'm doing pretty good right now, don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is that had I been able to, had I not had that, oh God, how am I going to pay all these student loans back because I've decided to become a teacher and I just can't afford the student loan payments. It is really a travesty that something that is such a human and civil right as education, we're losing the best and the brightest because they don't want to become teachers because they're afraid they're not going to be able to have a standard of living that they think they should have. I don't know if you know this or not, Congressman Hoyer, but I've just been elected to be the vice president elect for the Maryland State Education Association. And one of the things that I'm really going to work tirelessly on is making sure that we bring pride back to this profession and to educators, because I'm proud to be a teacher and I'm proud that of all the work that our members do. So we definitely need some resources to make sure that those students that are in that academy that Dr. Golson is talking about, that those are replicated and that we allow those educators to go on and get their certification so that they can teach without being laden with student loan debt. And I'm going to go back to the technology for just a second.
Great. I want to get to some other people before we have to end.
Oh, listen, I'll end whenever you tell me to, Congressman Hoyer.
No, I just wanted to let you know we have 3 other people I want to have an opportunity before we quit.
Okay, so those were my big rocks. I was done.
Great. All right, terrific. Thanks a lot for that. Talking about Dr. Curry, let me say, I told you my granddaughter has 3 children, 3 of my great-grandchildren in school. And Judy, my granddaughter, raves about the effort that the teachers of those 3 great-grandchildren did. I mean, some of the teachers came to their house and delivered material. That's how conscientious they were. They really are heroes. I mean, you know, what they've gone through, and we need to really focus on that.
Thank you for sharing that. There's so many who do. They've worked harder than they've ever planned on working before, and had to learn a lot of new things themselves, and will have gone above and beyond.
Well, that was certainly Judy. Again, my granddaughter's name is Judy, as my wife's name was Judy. Judy just raves about the teachers and how conscientious they were and how much help they gave her in helping the 3 children. And I think every parent in America appreciate what teachers do much more today than they did a year ago. Wayne Bauman, National PTA Field Service Committee member. Mr. Bauman, do you have some observations you'd like to make?
Yeah, I'll be very quick. As you said, I represent National PTA, and we've been working in Maryland for the last year. And I feel like I know Maryland a little bit, but it represents a lot of things that are happening all over the country. And I just want to dovetail on some of the things that have already been said, because they're true quite a few places. What the monies that have been allocated under the most recent legislation, and what Maryland appears to have been doing, and what the members in Maryland have shared with us over this past year, is that flexibility and creativity have happened and will continue to happen using the funds that have been allocated. And I think that's a changing pivot point in education, both across the country, but also here in Maryland. And I think, Congressman, you had voiced that it can't remain the same. It has to be something different to justify the amount of allocated resources. And so it's an investment in education, and I think it's going to be demonstrated. I think one thing that I'll point out is that the virtual education I think can be important for many of our students who are at risk, because while many at-risk students flourish in school, some of our students flourish virtually because they are bullied, they are picked on, they are isolated, they are marginalized in school. And what we have seen nationwide, and I'm sure there are some in Maryland, who are flourishing in a virtual setting because they don't have to go to school every day and are faced with a bullying episode. They can be themselves in a virtual world, they are learning, and so forth. So I think there are students who will benefit from a virtual setting, who would not flourish, who would not benefit in a face-to-face setting. So I appreciate the fact that schools are looking at a setting where some students could benefit in that type of an educational setting. And as far as summer programs, I think that what might happen is that some schools should look at engaging parents and community in some of those learning opportunities to fill the gap, where teachers may not feel that they can do that. But there are school systems across the country that are turning to parents and community to help do that, because parents have been isolated in some of the education as well, having to fill that gap. Many parents have left the workforce and stuff to do that, and they don't have the resources. So it'd be an opportunity to help cover many of those things in a double edge, educating parents, but also providing the gaps in learning with students as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bauman. Ms. Sinanon Hill.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me. Can you all hear me okay? I was having sound issues earlier.
We can.
Great. Thank you for having us.
Let me
and
say
the
on
National
that,
PTA for.
this is I've been on probably conservatively 200 or 300 hours of Zoom calls about all this legislation. You know, we've been working on it for a year. Somebody said, oh, well, this is a new initiative under Joe Biden. As all of you know, we had 5 bills, a lot of discussion, 2 bills that weren't passed. But in any event, the most consistent comment on every one of these conference calls is, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Right.
I don't know, all of you have experienced that. So I gave everybody a little cup holder, and what it has on it is, you're on mute. So we're glad we can hear you now.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you for having us, and thanks for National PTA for reaching out to both me and Gerard to invite us to this conversation today. I'm a parent first. I have 2 girls that attend a school in Prince George's County, Overlook Full Spanish Immersion School. We're a specialty school. I also serve as PTA president at Overlook. I have had the pleasure during this tough year working with our principal and our families to bridge communication and continue to make sure that the information and communication, not only from our school system, but from our schoolhouse, is shared openly and widely to all of our families. We, you know, in terms of that gap that we see, I was one of those parents, I remember at the beginning of March, really concerned. Summer slide happens naturally during the summer, but I was really even more concerned about the COVID slide. My kids attend a specialty school, so language immersion and being able to see their teachers and hear the language is super important for us, and we weren't really getting that until we picked back up, I guess, in April. Our PTA has done a lot of things with our school by doing math night and family literacy night and STEAM nights, where we provide materials to our families that they can do a curbside, very safe distance pickup, so we can engage with them after hours. We have done things to keep them going socially and emotionally, because a lot of kids can't see each other real in person, but they do Zoom calls, which can be part of the whole Zoom overload, which everyone has. But, you know, we have made a really important commitment to our families to make sure that we share information. Oftentimes our schoolhouse, they're so busy working in the schoolhouse doing what they need to do. Information from our families aren't oftentimes trickled down. Dr. Goldson has done a phenomenal job during this pandemic, engaging with our families by doing town halls and community meetings, the communications. I had the pleasure of serving on our transportation task force before the pandemic, and we had a great plan to roll out, and then this all happened. But all of the work that all of her various verticals throughout PGCPS have really been, I think, far impressive, exceeded my expectations as a parent. And getting that information to our families, sometimes once it happens at the top, doesn't oftentimes trickle down because not everyone sees things. So we've worked really closely with our schools to engage our families. I mean, our PTA has about 190 something parents that are members of our PTA. We never had 190 members for our PTA prior to the pandemic. And here we are in a pandemic, and families are joining our organization. They tune into PTA meetings virtually, which I hope we get to keep, because I think that's the way that, you know, parents are so busy. When we get back to real life, whatever that looks like after this, we still want to be able to connect virtually, because it's easier when you have multiple kids and you're split going many different places. But I think from my perspective, I would love to know from this American Rescue Plan how it will impact our schools in Prince George's County, but not just the county school system. I think for parents, they specifically want to know how it impacts their school and their children. What I've seen recently in the past couple of days leading up to kids being back in the schoolhouse yesterday, some of these principals in these schools have done a really good job with making videos and sharing, this is what it looks like physically in our school. And that's what our families need to know. We want to know what the state's doing, great. We want to know what the county is doing, fantastic. But how does that trickle down to our school? How is our classroom going to look? What is, you know, pick up and drop off look like? What are our kids doing with before and after care? What are we doing with clubs? How does that work now? And how is this money going to impact us long-term? Spending is great. You know, resources were an issue prior to the pandemic. So cleaning, all of that, now it's even more of an issue because parents are even more connected to what's happening in the classroom, whether it's virtual or in school, and what's happening in the schoolhouse. I think this pandemic has opened up our vision to all of these things, just even down to curriculum. I have parents asking me questions. Well, aren't they supposed to be learning this, that, and the other? And then I direct them, okay, you need to go to Maryland State, go look at the core curriculum guidelines and see what your student is learning at this point. So the questions that we're getting now are far deeper than we've gotten in the past few years. And I'm new to elementary. I only have a third grade or a second grade. I haven't been doing this very long. So, but in my short time, our parents are super resilient. Our kids, of course, have been amazing. For myself, my kids have chosen to remain at home. That's because they get, you know, home cooked meals like 3-4 times a day, which they wouldn't get if they were in school. So, but, you know, I won't take up too much of our time. I know we're going past our allotted time, but I can talk about this forever because I love my school. I love my students. And I think now more than ever, we really need to embrace our families and share with each other and give them an opportunity to talk to each other. And that's what we've done during this pandemic is given not only our PTA members, but our parents, because we serve our entire schoolhouse, an opportunity for them to talk to each other during this time and share information.
Well,
Anyway,
I'm sure. Well, thank you for being with us. And I'm sure that all the superintendents appreciate parents like yourself who are engaged, who are involved, and who are constructive. You know, there's some who are just sort of destructive and, you know, nothing's done right. But to give constructive suggestions and give some assistance in reaching the realization of those improvements. So last, but certainly not least, Mr. Tyler, who's also president of the PTA. Mr. Tyler?
Good morning and almost good afternoon to everyone.
Well, we're trying to get through before noon.
Yes, sir. So thank you again for having me. I really appreciate all the work that you have done for our communities. It doesn't go unnoticed. So I just want to, you know, thank you. I think I echo many of the sentiments that have already been made on this call. I mean, and to quote my 93-year-old grandmother, when life throws you lemons, you have to make lemonade. And that's kind of the approach our PTSA and our community at My Angelo French Immersion kind of have. We didn't ask for this. We are here now. How do we make the best out of it to provide the best educational opportunities for our scholars? So I do commend Dr. Golson. I've said this in school board meetings. I support her. She's done a phenomenal job. One of the things we've done and really focused on is outreach to make sure that our communities are connected. So every Wednesday morning, and we've kind of just moved to bi-weekly, and you know, Rado, we benchmark off of each other. We have an 8 o'clock call called Coffee and Conversations with our principals. And we go week by week to just provide updates to our communities to, you know, make, you know, put the most complex things, whether it be CDC guidelines or whatever the new news of the day in layman's terms to our parents, so they understand, they comprehend where we are, what are we doing, and what do we need to do to continue to be safe and successful. And so we've done that work. One of the things from a parent perspective that I'm hearing a lot is, what are we going to do over the summer? How do we close this educational gap that the pandemic created? And so there are a number of ideas that I know that parents have put forth, whether it be, you know, after school programs, summer programs, equity learning hubs for our students, and particularly focused on students with disabilities, some of our low income families, and our ELA learners. So, you know, really making sure that we are putting modules in place that will help our scholars, especially if they suffered educational loss through the pandemic, to get caught up by the time they advance to the next grade. I know I'm fortunate enough to be a proud parent of a 7th grader who's a 4.12 student. And so she's flourishing, and I'm greatly appreciative of that. But I also know that in talking to our parents from a teacher perspective, they got a class, the pandemic has given them a crash course in classroom management, where they have to manage their children while they're working, oftentimes a full-time job. And so, you know, really the expectation, and really from talking to our community stakeholders, is really ensuring that school is safe and remains safe. Not just now, but going into the next school year. but and also to it personally really dealing with expanding our mental health resources, because we are dealing with our children who are returning to school that have lost loved ones due to this pandemic, and they're still processing. Some of them are still grieving. Some of them are still hurting. And they're dealing with that, and so those mental health resources is critical, not just for our students, but also for our teachers. If you're like me and you suffered a faculty member who have unfortunately passed away due to COVID-19, we are a community. It doesn't just affect our students, it affects the staff, it affects our parents as well. And so I'm looking forward to seeing the development of those things. I know with Dr. Golson's in the budget, equity learning hubs, there was funding passed in the budget, so I'm excited about that work. And I'm looking forward again to partner with the opportunities to partner with our school administration and partner with other local units to come together and really just take a community approach to solve some of these issues. One thing I do commend Dr. Golson on is the numerous of town halls and the outreach that her administration has had. I know even in the coffee and conversation meeting that I mentioned, I had both Dr. Fawcett and Dr. Fawcett at some point come on and just for our community alone to say, hey, this is what we have in our plant operations. This is the amount of PPE stuff that we have. Here's what we're waiting on the state to provide. And those things really reassure our parents that, hey, we're getting closer to figuring this thing out. And we're doing the best we can given the circumstances. So I look forward for those educational opportunities to close the education gap, continued, support in PPE to make sure our teachers and our staff are safe, and the expansion of our mental health resources, because I really believe that is critical going forward as we move through this pandemic.
Well, thank you very much, all of you. And I want to tell Anne Arundel, Calvert, Charles, Prince George, and when I leave, St. Mary's, that next time we meet, I'm going to have you choose a PTA person to come on and say how wonderful all of you are, because I know that there are a lot of them that would do just that. Monica, you have salted the group here with some real fans. Good for you.
I didn't even pick them. You all did.
No, I didn't pick
great
them.
Community.
PTA picked them, but I'm glad they were here.
Me too.
And I want to thank the superintendents, and I want to thank Teresa representing the teachers that all of you also work with and deem to be colleagues and partners in this effort. Again, we've made an extraordinary investment of the taxpayers' money, and we're going to make some more. As you know, President Biden wants another $2 or $3 trillion to be invested to get our economy to be in a competitive spot with the rest of the world, which has invested a lot more in infrastructure in his Build Back Better plan. But as I said at the beginning, no investment's more important than investing in our kids and their education, their well-being. And Mr. Tyler, in a number of you mentioned this in terms of your own school system, the mental health issue that we're confronting has been heightened substantially by COVID-19 and what the American people have been through and what the kids have been through and what the teachers and what everybody has been through in terms of meeting this challenge. And so we're going to have to make sure that our mental health system is up to that task. One thing we know, what this COVID-19 crisis has shown, is that our public health system was not up to the crisis. Our public health system needs to be beefed up. And I think we had some substantial negligence. I won't go beyond that in terms of dealing with this crisis in a timely and robust fashion. But having said that, we are where we are. We're investing a lot of money, and we're putting it in the hands of certainly the 5 of you, but also of our teachers, of our parents, so that we can not only meet the crisis, but come out better at the other end. You know, Rahm Emanuel is famously quoted as saying, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And what he meant by that, of course, was if you're confronted with a crisis and you're committed to building back better, whatever, and that can be building back students, mental health capacity, et cetera, et cetera. If you're committed to that, you will come out better and will be a stronger, I think, country as a result. But it's going to require the good work of all of us. And I am so proud of all of you who are involved in the educational system, which I believe, and of course, again, Judy was, Teresa, you the fourth grade, Judy was 7 years of age. So I guess you're in the second grade. And her mother used to tell me, Judy knew she wanted to be a teacher when she was 7 years of age. And she never diverted from that. You know, we dated at Suitland High School. She always knew she wanted to go to Towson, which was then a teacher's college, as all of you know. And we have got to make sure that we give incentives, both in terms of status and in terms of economics, to young people to make them want to be teachers. Because we cannot afford, you know, the feminist movement and the women's rights movement, which I've been a very strong supporter, was an absolute necessity. But it also, you know, life's a series of trade-offs, and what a lot of young women had was a new choice, a different choice, and they made a judgment as to whether or not, and men as well, but largely. Young women who now, when I was at Georgetown Law School, there were 3 women in my law school class. My class was 136 people. 3 of them were women. Now, if you go to Georgetown Law School and any law school in the country, over 50% are women. And, you know, we're confronted, as I said at the beginning, with competition, and we need to meet that competition because having committed, innovative, bright, able, hard-charging teachers is essential to our society. But anyway, let me end it up and thank all of you for being with us. I hope those that were on C-SPAN is covering this, and it's also being streamed. I hope they found some stuff in here. If any of you have questions about specifics, we'll be glad to answer them. Give our staff a call. At our office, both the congressional office or the majority leader's office, and we'll be glad to handle that. As all of you know, Antonia Hill is specifically one of my senior policy advisors for education, along with Rachel Snyder and others on my team. But I want the superintendents to know, as I think you do know, anything that we can do to help, any information that we can get, any sort of log jams that we can unstick, you let us know, because we want to do everything we can to make sure you have the best opportunity to do the best job you possibly can, because you're all so very good, and the people who work for you are as well. Thank you all very, very much for participating.
Thank you, Congressman.
We made it before the afternoon.
Thank you, Congressman
so
Hoyer.
much, Congressman.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye-bye.